And that's why the local food typically, tastes better and it's much healthier. So when you go to a farmer's market, the tomatoes you get from a farmer there versus the tomatoes you get from the store, they often look quite different. And that's because of the soil. So that's where the whole idea started, is how do you get, local food to the customer easier and make it more accessible.
Today, my guest is Seth. Seth is the co-founder of Locavana. It's really great to have you here today. Please tell us more about yourself and what Locavana does.
Sure. So I'll start with Locavana. So obviously there's a lot of issues with the food supply that you see in the news quite frequently. The rise of chronic disease is pretty prevalent these days. So there's, higher rates of diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and a lot of that is related to the food supply. So there's the rise of processed foods and industrial farming practices. And so that's leading to Americans being overall quite unhealthy. And so how we're trying to solve that is really localizing the food supply, because local food is significantly healthier. So if you think about local food, local farmers do things that industrial farming practices cannot do. So they take care of the soil much better. They don't use as many pesticides, oftentimes don't use any pesticides, use these regenerative farming practices that kind of simulate nature. And so overall, the soil from farmers is significantly better. And so better soil leads to more nutrients in the plants or whatever you're growing, which ultimately leads to more nutrients in the food. And that's why the local food typically, tastes better and it's much healthier. So when you go to a farmer's market, the tomatoes you get from a farmer there versus the tomatoes you get from the store, they often look quite different. And that's because of the soil. So that's where the whole idea started, is how do you get, local food to the customer easier and make it more accessible. And so that's what Locavana is trying to do. We're making local food more accessible. So we've got an online marketplace where farmers can list their products. And instead of having to go to, 10 different farmers, you can get everything in one place. And then really the magic is the logistics. So we've got the online marketplace, but that's not our core business. I think our core business is the logistics. And that's the hard part, getting the food from the farmer to the customer in an efficient manner. And so we've built the infrastructure, and that looks like, a hub. We've got a fleet of temperature controlled trucks, and we'll be launching something this summer that's like our third facet of that infrastructure. And so getting the food from the farmer to the customer is what we excel at. And that's really the hard part. And
Wow.
then just in terms of, my background, definitely not a farmer. I grew up in Fallbrook, California, the avocado capital of the world. And I say I'm from Southern California, and people say, oh, you must be a surfer. But if you know Fallbrook, you know that that's not the case. It's a very rural town. But my career started in consulting, and then I worked in the private equity world for 4 years. So heavy finance. So my life now is quite different in the startup realm, but loving it every day.
That's amazing. What skills do you think you developed or cultivated in the consulting and finance world that translate into what you're doing at Locavana?
It's a really good question. So in the consulting world, you learn a lot. You get a lot of breadth of learning, right? You don't really go deep. But the one thing as a 23 to 25-year-old you learned is like, what does good look like? So like your partners, they've got a really high bar for, what's acceptable to send to a client, right? So really the bar is quite high on like what a presentation looks like, how you present ideas, how to clarify a message, building materials, doing analysis. So you really see the different levels of, okay to really good. And so that's kind of like a broad skill. I wouldn't say it's like very technical. And then the finance world, really, in private equity, I learned a lot of financial modeling, how to value a company, what are the drivers to a company's success. And so in building Locavana, one of the key things we try to do is extend our runway. We don't want time to ever be the reason why we aren't able to make it. So really the modeling, managing cash, I've had to do that for companies in the past that were distressed. So I got pretty good at cash management. Don't want to be in the distress situation here, but it's good to extend our runway infinitely, hopefully, so that we can, I'm fully confident that it'll work and we'll make it, but just want to make sure we have the time to really build it the right way and not have the
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to to building, because you're a marketplace and there's two sides to it. You have your supplier or your vendors, and then you have your end consumer who's, paying for the food. How do you go about establishing relationships with each of them?
Yeah, it's sort of like a chicken and egg problem, right? Initially it was really hard because when we first had the app, our MVP, which we call it like the minimum viable product, was as minimum as it gets from an app perspective. So we're going to these farmers and we're showing them this app on an iPad that's not working when we show it to them. And we say, yeah, we haven't done any sales. We don't have any farmers on the site. Like it was a really hard sell at first, but we just had to kind of prove ourselves. Like when we told the farmers our vision, how it was going to help them, kind of the timeline, when we were going to get there, I think they bought into it. So we had a couple core staple farmers which were super critical to start with, where they just really took a chance on us and believed in us. And then from there, having those core staples, which really was meat for us. So we have a meat farmer, a beef farmer. They had like 100 SKUs that they added. So from there, then we could start selling to customers. And then, once we drove, customer demand, then you can get those other suppliers that, weren't as excited early on when we hadn't proven ourselves. Because that was a lot of the reaction was, hey, hit me back in a couple months once you've gotten some sales. So once we have that, it's a lot easier. And then when you get a couple of staple farmers on the site, yeah, we have this one fully regenerative, like USD organic, best in class farm. When I go to other vendors now and say, yeah, we've got them on the site, it's like a level of credibility, I would say. But yeah, you're always kind of mismatching supply and demand. I'd like to always have a little bit more supply so that we can, I don't want to run out of products is really what we're going after.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And I understand the chicken and egg thing. Farmers are like, well, but do you have any customers? And you're like, but we're working on it. So it's this tough position to be in. But, eventually, like you said, you'll get someone that's like, they believe in you and they believe in what you're doing. And then once you have the product, you can get your customers from there. And not saying it's easy, but once you have something to sell.
Yeah, and a part of our offering to the vendors, like we're super vendor friendly in what we offer them, so it's completely risk free, and our fee whenever we sell products is quite small. So if we don't charge anything to be on our site. I heard an apple farmer yesterday say that he made 4% on every dollar sold for his apples, like at the store. Think about like a big semi truck full of really nice organic apples. I think he said he made like $1,000 on a full semi truck full of apples, which is kind of crazy to think about. So if he's making 4%, and if he sells through us, he's making several times that.
Oh, that's amazing too. So you're supplying better quality food that's local. It doesn't have to travel as far. So there's, an impact on the environment right there. And then you're helping farmers increase their margin and delivering better food to the end consumer. That's like a win-win-win
Yeah,
for
like
everyone.
eventually, once we get enough demand, the farmer shouldn't have to sell anywhere else because the margin will be so much higher through us because we cut out all of the middleman. If you think about eggs, so a dozen eggs at let's say Whole Foods is about $10 now for like the organic pasture raised idle farms. Farmers probably making 250 $3 out of that, and
Hmm.
then it goes from the farmer to the packager to the wholesaler, wholesaler to the final grocery store, and in the middle, the farmer's losing like $7 of that margin. So you're right. It's a lot better to sell through someone who can cut all those steps out. And then earlier I was talking about the soil health,
Hmm.
and making more nutrient dense products, but you just touched on something that I didn't cover is the time. So there's been a lot of studies where spinach and all these different fruits and vegetables, they really degrade quite quickly in their nutrient density just as time goes on, something like 50% plus over a week. So time from harvest to your plate actually matters quite a bit for the nutrient density. So reducing the geographical distance between the farmer and yourself and getting it there quick really makes a big difference in how nutrient dense the food actually is.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about when they're buying food. I think, we go to Whole Foods or we go to our health grocery store and we buy something that's organic and it looks fresh, but we're not thinking about the time that has passed between when it was plucked to when we're buying it and then eating it. Because sometimes, we leave stuff in the fridge or in the pantry for a little while before we get into it at home. So that's an important data point.
Yeah, and like Michigan is the apple capital of the world, right? Like West Michigan's got, all these apple orchards everywhere. And we were in the store one day and one of the apples was from Chile. And it was peak apple season in the fall. And so they're importing apples from Chile to this grocery store when the best apple farms are right down the road. And who knows what covered the apple from Chile? Like it must have been wax or whatever to keep it, somewhat fresh
Hmm.
during the time of transit. And they do that just because they want a year-round supply. They want consistency with their suppliers at the grocery store. But it just doesn't make a ton of sense when you've got world-class apples right down the road and you're importing from other countries. We
Yeah,
use this phrase like if your fruit and vegetables need a passport, something's wrong.
I like that. Going back to the like how you think of growth at the business. So I saw that you're currently in Chicago and Grand Rapids. And are you in Boston yet, or is that official yet? Not
Not
yet.
yet. No.
Okay. So when you thought of where to start the business, I know you're based in Chicago, so that seems kind of like a natural fit. But then looking at Grand Rapids and the other cities that you have coming on the list, what about those cities attracted you? Was it like ease of entry or just, you had farmers that were more open?
Yeah. So this is something we've evolved on and iterated quite a bit. I would say we started in the Midwest out of convenience. So Chris, my co-founder, and I was based in Chicago. He was in Grand Rapids. We used to work together at our prior company, and that's how we knew each other. So just from where we were living, it made sense to launch in Grand Rapids and Chicago. I think the best markets are probably like California because you have year-round produce where
Mm,
it's been a big challenge for us, launching in the wintertime in the Midwest where we still really don't have that many vegetables that are in season yet. Most of those come, June, July, August, and so on. So it was more of a convenience decision, but it really helped us, build the company and kind of figure out where the issues were in our website, figure out issues in the model before we had a ton of demand. So I think like just launching and getting it started in the Midwest and starting a little bit slow, I think was probably the right decision as we built it on the fly. And then we sort of iterated where we thought we would have all these distinct regions where there'd be like a region head in every city, and like hyper localized where each city was kind of its own different thing, and each city would have its own vendors. We're sort of moving away from that, where it's going to be a little bit more regional, and that provides a ton of different benefits. So now we've got a headquarters and warehouse. It's sort of our centralized hub in Zeeland, Michigan. And so now we can bring vendors from, a 3-hour radius from Zeeland, which is sort of by Grand Rapids, bring them to the hub. And then from that distribution hub, we can get to Chicago, we can get to Detroit, we can get to Traverse City, Grand Rapids. So this more regional sort of hub and spoke model is better for the vendors
mhm.
because now if you're a Grand Rapids vendor, you have access to 6 different regions of customers. And it's better for the customers because they've got access to more food and more options. So we want to make sure that, if you're in, say, Traverse City or Chicago, you see some Traverse City, Chicago vendors. So you do get the local experience, but you have access to others as well, if you want that. So we're starting in the Midwest. We're bootstrapping the company. So we want to prove out the model here first, and then we'll expand nationally after that.
When it comes to connecting with more farmers, what are some of the tactics that you use? Is it like networking, referrals from existing farmers? Are you using outbound business development tactics?
Just on the road, we drive to the farms. That's how we started. We just cold show up at their doorstep and try to pitch them. That's how we got our first few customers, or first few vendors, I should say. Then vendor referrals is probably the best way because if you provide a good experience to one vendor, they will often tell people they know, and it helps them too. If you're a beef farm, you want the website to be as good as possible. So you want to add good vegetables. So the customer comes to buy beef, they've got other options too. So I would say, going to farmers markets, talking to farmers there. Chris, my co-founder, actually got kicked out of one farmers market because he was soliciting their vendors. There's like 2 groups of farmers markets. One of them are run by cities, and the cities don't really care. They just want the farmer to have the best experience. So like if we're helping the farmer out, they don't really care. But you have these private farmers markets where they're like, don't talk to our people. So we always thought that, we're pushing the envelope enough where if we're getting kicked out of farmers markets, we're doing a good job. But yeah, a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls. Like in person is the best. In person, if I can talk to the person, see the person eye to eye, really walk them through it, then I can ask questions live. They see I'm a real person. I think our conversion rate's like 95% in person. My conversion rate sending cold emails to farmers is probably like 1% getting a response. So really, like we try to be in person as much as possible.
Yeah, it makes sense. And there's something about when you show up to someone's farm, it's really hard for them to slough you off or tell you to leave or whatever. They see that you've put the time and the energy and that you really care about this. So yeah, I imagine that goes way farther.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of trying to reach your end consumer, what are you doing to get the word out about Locavana? What marketing tactics are you using there?
Yeah, so I would say this is probably Chris and I's biggest weakness. We're finance and operations guys. So pretty early on, we realized we needed help there. So we hired a marketing person or a marketing director. I shouldn't say person. He's actually like a leader. He's really good. And our initial thought was, hey, let's hire someone part time. We can evaluate them. They can keep their current job, and we'll see kind of where it goes. So our first interview actually for this part time role was this 24-year-old who just blew us away in the interview. So we had like a 30-minute interview scheduled, and after going 2 hours, he told us everything wrong with our marketing strategy and what we should be doing. And we're like, yeah, you're right. And can you start in 2 weeks? And he said yes. So he's been working full time for about 2 months. And really, what we're trying to do is just plant seeds pretty wide. So, consumer, what I found is like the bar is really high in e-commerce to get someone to buy your product. So really what we're trying to do is check off all of the reasons why you would not buy our product. So like, is the website experience super flawless? Is the delivery experience is a wow you? Are there enough products on the site for it to be a compelling offer? Is the quality of the products on the site super high? Are the prices, where we want them to be? So we're slowly, we have a grade for each of these different items, and each week we review our self grade on each of these things. So we just want to make sure that there's none of these reasons aren't the reason why you're buying from us. And then in terms of the marketing side, social is a pretty big one for consumer.
Hmm.
So Ben's pretty savvy at putting all those social posts together. Really, we're starting to target our marketing message more towards health and taste rather than certain things like community support, convenience. I think those things are really true, but the reason that someone buys is pretty selfish typically. So is this food going to make you feel better, live longer, be healthier, and does it taste good? I think those are the things that really make people purchase and come back to us. So that's really what our message is, and tying that to local. We've got a podcast called The Unprocessed Podcast where we showcase leaders reshaping the food supply. Is sort of our tagline. I'd say that's more for the social media clips and meeting experts in the field. I'm not trying to be Joe Rogan for food, but that's one way where someone if a farmer wants to talk to us or a customer wants to hear about us, they've got hundreds of hours. I got not hundreds yet, but tens of hours of content where they can really get to know us. And then grassroots events, since we're selling locally, and that's a big one. Like we try to do as many grassroots events as possible. We did the Rockford, Michigan Christmas parade. I sat at a farmer's market for one season, and we're doing booths at a bunch of fitness events this summer, a bunch of farmer events, sponsoring things like that. We're casting a wide net. We're planting a lot of seeds, and we're starting to see those sprout. Right now. So it takes a lot. It's daily. It's a daily grind,
Hmm.
and eventually everything starts to compound, and you start to see the success of it.
Yeah, a grassroots effort, definitely. In terms of other markets, and maybe you've thought of this, I just thought of it myself because what you're doing is actually near and dear to my heart. And high quality food is something that's really important. It's something I've really put a lot of time and energy into researching and exploring. And the result of it has been that I don't eat out very much. Like I try to cook at home because I can control what I'm eating a lot more. Even though, like I buy a lot of my stuff from some of these other like health grocery stores that we talked about before. I'm wondering if you thought about this already, but trying to develop a new customer base with restaurants. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of restaurants that would love to buy higher quality food, especially, locally, and support local farms as opposed to the giant food supply companies that they buy from. Is that something that you've looked into?
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much of our long-term strategy to our
Sure.
competitors. I'll say that for the restaurants, you need a lot of suppliers,
Hmm.
you need a lot of vendors, and you need consistent vendors. So it's definitely in our plans. And like the whole farm to table restaurant craze is probably the wrong word. Trend
Hmm.
is is growing quite fast. We just did a podcast. Our marketing director Ben did a podcast with Sylvan Table in Detroit, and they're probably the best farm to table restaurant in the state of Michigan. And they walked through kind of their growth and their process, and it's really cool. They actually grow the food at their farm, most of or a lot of it, and then they source from other farmers. That's definitely a big market. That's where we're getting to. There's some other partnerships too. So I view it as our go-to-market strategy. There's three different revenue channels: the direct to consumer through our traditional website, eventually the restaurants, and then this partnership aspect where you have a lot more leverage. Where if you sign one partner, whether it's through business, gym, whatever, that gives you access to a lot of different people.
That's really smart. In terms of tech, obviously you have the website, there's a marketplace there. Do you have an app, or is an app coming?
An app is coming. So we built the tech ourselves. My co-founder Chris is self-taught coder. So he's a Navy SEAL turned manufacturing CEO, and he learned how to code in his free time for the last like 10 years. So he's pretty good at the back end stuff. We had a call with, and I don't have a coding background at all. So we had a call with a real coder, and he was quite impressed with Chris's chops. So that was great. And then the whole vibe coding. Have you seen that X? So
No.
there's this phrase called vibe coding. It's like using Claude and these AI tools to code for you.
Mm.
And I've gotten pretty good at that. So Chris does all of our back end and really built the bones of our app. And then Ben designs our front end, and then I implement the design through Claude. So I just punch into Claude, this is what I want the design to look like. And then I just go back and forth with Claude, the AI tool, for hours at a time. And that's how we really built it. So I kind of like vertically integrating and owning as much of our tech stack, as much of our process as possible, so that we don't have to rely on anybody else. We don't have an app yet, and the reason is there's quite a few changes that we're making to the app or the website on a pretty much daily basis. And so once we get our subscription, all that stuff built in, then we'll launch the app. We just don't want to make it where if somebody downloads it and they don't have the update for like our new features, that might cause issues. So we just want to get further along before we incorporate the app. That'll be ready to go in a couple months.
That's awesome. Do you envision that the app will be like the number one point of sale, or do you still think people will use desktop over? Like what's kind of the vision and the goal with the app?
I don't know really. I mean, in my view, we're going to offer both and see what the date is. I don't really know. I'll be curious to see what. I'll let you know how it works out. Yeah, I suspect it's one of those things I learned with the website development is like coding it and building the front end, like design on the website. You spend 90% of the time on desktop, or at least I made this mistake. And then I didn't spend too much time on mobile, and then everyone ends up using mobile. So it's kind of like a waste of time to spend so much time on desktop. Like our desktop app, I'm in love with it, and I'm like, man, I wish everyone, because you can add way more features to the desktop. But yeah, making like the true app experience, I think that's what customers are used to. Like I've never used Uber Eats through an app or through the website. I always use the app to do it. But maybe since it's grocery shopping and you're doing a lot more products, you'll use desktop. I don't know. Like an airplane ticket, I almost always use my desktop. I don't know why. It's just like maybe it's like a millennial thing.
Maybe. I have a theory. I have a theory that most of your purchases will come from an app. So I think it's
Okay.
brilliant that you're working on it already and that it'll be ready in a few months.
Yeah. Why do you say that?
I just like I'm thinking of consumers like and I'm trying to not just think of myself, but when I'm talking to friends or my family that buy stuff online, groceries, whatever, it's through the app. It's through Instacart, it's through Amazon Prime. And if you ever think like you're laying on the sofa or something, you're like, "Oh, I'm really comfortable. I want to do something. I have my phone, my laptop's over there. I have to go to my desktop. Like, do I really want to do it right now?" Like, kind of push it off. Yeah. One other question I had for you. So we talked a lot about meat, produce, like fresh products. Is there going to be any, are there going to be any products that are going to be added to Locavana that are not from farmers? You know, like your everyday stuff, like, I don't know, toothpaste or paper products.
Yeah, I feel like you've been in our strategy rooms talking about this. Yes, short answer is yes. So and this is sort of a philosophical question that we're still wrestling with internally. Like, what products do we want to have on the site? So we've got, the typical meat, chicken, fish, produce. We've got that, which are sort of the perishables, although you can freeze a lot of that stuff.
Hmm.
We've got pantry staples. So your honeys, your salsas, syrup, things like that. We've got coffee, eggs, milk, cheese. So we try to prioritize locally raised products, locally grown products, and locally processed. So coffee does not grow. You can't grow coffee beans in the United States other than Hawaii. We still want to offer coffee. So if you roast it locally, that's good enough for us to be on the site. We've got this company, Vargo Brother Ferments, and they do fermented vegetables in glass jars. And everyone loves the products. It's really good. But they take locally sourced products and process it. So we sell that. We've got a company called Topped, and they do chia seeds and cacao mixes for yogurts and smoothies and things like that. They source from other countries for like the chocolate and things like that, but they process locally. So that's our focus there. But ultimately, we want to replace the need to go to the grocery store.
Hmm.
So to your point on the everyday essentials, like if we could white label, toilet paper, paper towels. I think we would certainly be interested in doing that at some point. The question is, how do you make it local? Also, like the health bent, maybe there's a way to offer just the healthier options because that's really what we want to provide. So things used with the right materials and so on. But that's down the road. I would say it's not core to what we're trying to do right now. It's sort of once we've gotten further along, we'll look into that.
Very cool. My last question for you, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything in your business instantly, what would you do?
Change anything in my business? I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to have 1 million customers tomorrow.
Well, yeah, everyone would, but what's something that you think would be like taking the steps towards those 1 million customers?
So I'm super excited to see how some of these tech advancements evolve. So there's ways you can transport other than a car. So I'll just leave it at that I'm super
Hmm.
excited about. There's ways where you can build features with these AI assistants that we're using. And that could be like a game changer where we'll have, an Alexa like AI chatbot that can, build your grocery list immediately. So like if I could wave my wand, it would be like all of these things are ready to go and we can start implementing them. So yeah, just making the tech evolve faster because I think there's a lot of ways we can utilize AI, utilize transportation, even energy, like energy costs. If they continue to decline, I think it's a game changer for vertical farming. So offering, more products to our customers would definitely be available in the wintertime, but the energy costs are quite high to do that in a lot of instances. So I don't know if that's a great answer, but I'll have to think about that.
No, that was good. That was good because I think you're right. Like there's certain things you can't always get your round. So if there is like a technology or a way that you can do this that meets your company goals and standards, I think that would be huge as well. Cool. Well, Seth, it's been a pleasure. If anybody wants to reach out to you or learn more about Locavana, where can they find you?
Yeah, our website's locavana.com. Instagram and X accounts are at Shop Locavana. So if you want to see our marketing director's work, he's pretty good. He's pretty slick. So yeah, check it out.
Awesome. Thank you.